We often ask ourselves the question, why in the Western world has the church begun to die? The reason is obvious. Because we sell our faith cheaply and we expect people to follow a cheap grace. There are Christians around the world who are dying for the name of Jesus, and there are Christians in the West who are scared to speak his truth and his name simply because someone might frown at them and call them a bad name. And spiritually, the church has been asking people to follow a faith without any cost, without any personal sacrifice. And this kind of spirituality has meant that the faith is cheaply taken and cheaply disposed of. There is a reason why in this country you can blaspheme the Christ, but you cannot blaspheme Muhammad. You can't insult Muhammad. It's because the liberal establishment fear the Muslim community. To go. Hey! How are you? Oh, all right.
You said you've got the t-shirts on today.
Yeah, I think we're the first group that's actually bothered to get some.
So when you say you're officially Soco Flows, I ain't never seen you before.
Yeah. I think he's a supporter. Yeah. I think he's a supporter.
Where you get it from? Where you get it from?
Look at the bones.
I got it.
Give age to those.
Oh, well, you made them and gave them out.
That correlates.
Okay. Make some content once. Make some content once.
Where's your camera?
Content. Over there.
How's life anyway?
It's right, man. This is cool, man. You're gonna jump in the middle.
Okay, so what I would like to talk about is something that the church desperately needs to rediscover. The church can very often talk about immorality, and let's be honest, in churchianity, in church culture, we have some sins that we like to talk about, and we have some sins that we don't like to talk about. We have some sins that we're very hard on, and then we have some sins that we wax and we wane on. And so this talk would like to address one of those sins that the church seems to have forgotten, but it needs to rediscover and to rediscover the contrary position. In Revelations 21, verse 8, we read, "But for the cowardly and unbelieving and abominable and murderers and immoral persons and sorcerers and idolaters and all liars, their part will be in the lake that burns with fire and brimstone, which is the second death." In the book of Revelations, it lists murderers and immoral persons and sorcerers and idolaters and liars, along with cowards. Cowards go to hell. The faith teaches Christians that we should live valiant and courageous lives, heroic and virtuous. And yet in church culture today, we have given way to that calling, and we have given way to a weak-willed, limp-wristed, avoid confrontation at all costs spirituality. Christians in the West are often governed by fear and cowardice. We are scared to be outsiders. We are scared to be rejected by wider society. We are scared to be condemned. We are scared to go to prison. We are scared to speak the truth. Christianity in the West has become a religion of cowards. and the scriptures are clear, cowards go to hell. As Christians, we must rediscover that muscular faith, that heroic faith, that courageous faith, that valiant faith that is spoken of in Hebrews 11. I just want to read that passage to you. In Hebrews 11, it lists champions of faith, people who achieve great things because of the faith that they have. And it lists amongst them conquerors and warriors. I'll show you. You turn to Hebrews 11, and what more shall I say? From verse 32, and what more shall I say? For time will fail me if I tell of Gideon, Barak, Samson, Jephthah, of David and Samuel and the prophets, who by faith conquered kingdoms, performed acts of righteousness, obtained promises, shut the mouths of lions, quenched the power of fire, escaped the edge of the sword, from weakness were made strong, became mighty in war, put foreign armies to flight. The champions of faith described in Hebrews are not just the ones we like to talk about in church. Amongst them are Gideon, Samson. These are warriors who fought for the truth. The faith that is being described is the faith that allowed the adherents to conquer kingdoms. And yet we Christians will run a mile before we engage in any kind of confrontation with anyone about any matter. Because we've been raised on spiritual milk for generations now and not spiritual food, solid food, mature food. The church must rediscover a theology of martyrdom. It must rediscover that living for Christ means you live for Christ even to the point of death, even accepting death if that is what following Christ means, even if going to prison is what following Christ means. We often ask ourselves the question, why in the Western world has the church begun to die? The reason is obvious. Because we sell our faith cheaply and we expect people to follow a cheap grace. If you go out and you buy a pair of trainers for $5 or £5, you're not going to look after them. You won't care. But if you've got a pair of shoes for £120, which one are you going to traipse through the mud in? The one that is cheap. The one that is cheap to you. The thing that is cheap is the thing that you don't value. And spiritually, the church has been asking people to follow a faith without any cost, without any personal sacrifice. And this kind of spirituality has meant that the faith is cheaply taken and cheaply disposed of. If living the Christian faith costs you something, you're less likely to give it up. If living the Christian faith means that you have to suffer something for it, then it takes on a meaning to your life that you're not willing to surrender. We'll do questions at the end, brother. And so we Christians must rediscover a theology that says that we will stand for our community, for our truth, against any opposition, no matter the cost, to ourselves personally, and that we will stand in solidarity with those who suffer for the faith. There are Christians around the world who are dying for the name of Jesus, and there are Christians in the West who are scared to speak his truth and his name simply because someone might frown at them and call them a bad name. How can we look at our brothers and sisters in the Middle East and in Southeast Asia and in Africa who are literally dying for the name of Christ when we in the West are simply scared to speak his name or speak his truth or to stand on his truth because we're scared that the society around us, that civil society, might condemn us for it. Where is our pride? Where is our honor as a community? We have forgotten the virtues of courage, and it is a virtue that the church bitterly needs to rediscover. And we have forgotten that sacrifice is what imbues character, that sacrifice is what builds the inner man. When a man sacrifices for his faith and for his community, he cultivates within him all those virtues that make a man a man. What we have instead in the church are a bunch of men who are more like boys. Scared, timid, frightened, not willing to stand up to defend their community, not willing to stand up to defend their faith, allowing their faith to be trodden on, allowing their community to be roughshod upon. We as Christians must rediscover what it is to pick up your cross every day and follow me. The cross was a symbol of ancient execution. It was a symbol of suffering. We Christians must rediscover what it means to live as red martyrs, which is to die for Christ, and as white martyrs, which means to live in condemnation by the world, in objection to the world, in suffering from the world, regardless of the cost. When we start to take our faith seriously again, then the world around us will take our faith seriously. There is a reason why in this country you can blaspheme the Christ, but you cannot blaspheme Muhammad. You can't insult Muhammad. It's because the liberal establishment fear the Muslim community. But they don't fear us. If we don't stand up for our faith, no one will respect you. Who is ever respected for allowing themselves to be trod upon and to be beat upon and to be oppressed? This is not what the Christian faith calls us to. We are called to live the lives of saints on earth. And a saint is one who lives a courageous and virtuous life. And this faith is the faith that I call you to be a man, to be a Christian man.